Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar being hosted by Power Metallic Mines. It's a small cap exploration company based in Canada that I believe has the potential to become a large cap one of these days. Joining me today is Terry Lynch, the company's president and CEO, and also on the line is Duncan Roy, the VP of Investor Relations. I met Terry a couple months ago when he made a presentation in Houston. I wanted to hear his presentation because I am very interested in finding ways to invest in copper and nickel, metals that are used in rechargeable batteries. I'm very bullish on the upside demand growth for rechargeable batteries. And one of our long-term EPG members, EPG members, Scott Koyich, told me that the company had a world-class discovery in Quebec. Uh, Power Metallic Mines is currently focused on developing their Nisk project, which includes the Nisk Main and Lion discoveries, which are high-grade nickel copper sulfide deposits with mineralizations for multiple battery metals, including nickel, copper, cobalt, palladium, and platinum. The Nisk project is located in Quebec, which is very important because Canada has tax credits that cover up to 50% of exploration cost. And there are numerous other advantages to the location of the projects, which Terry will tell us about. The Nisk property is very large. It spans a significant land position with 20 kilometers of strike length and numerous high-grade intercepts from their drilling program. In addition to the Nisk project, Power Metallic currently owns significant land packages in British Columbia and Chile, which are the subject of a possible spinoff that will be owned by Chilean Metals Inc. If the arrangement becomes effective. So Terry Lynch, he graduated in 1981 from St. Francis Xavier University, so he's a few years younger than me. He received a joint honors degree in economics and business administration. From 2005 to 2008, he was a partner in Kingsmill Capital Partners, a financial advisory firm specializing in advising public and private early stage growth companies. He has decades of experience in the mining industry, industrial products, oil and gas, and media. And Duncan Roy is, as I said, is the VP of Investor Relations. And he's been with the company for 4 or 5 years. Since 2019, he has run a highly successful capital markets advisory company. Prior to that, he spent over 3 decades in brokerage industry based in Toronto with various management roles. So I just want to remind you all that during the webinar, if you have questions, please type them into the chat box and we will answer them after the presentation. And with that, I will turn the controls over to Terry Lynch for an update on Power Metallic Mines. It's all yours, Terry.
All right, Dan. Thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience. It's an amazing time to be learning about Power Metallic. So without further ado, let's dive right in. We're going to talk to you about our world-class high-grade copper, PG, and nickel discovery. It's called Nisk, and it's in northern Quebec. We're not going to tell you anything we don't believe is true, but as always, please do your own due diligence. Give you a quick snapshot of the capital overview. Basically about 222 million shares outstanding at the moment, about 279 fully diluted. About half of it is within about 7-8 people's hands. The largest shareholder is myself and my family. I've also been pretty much the largest investor over the last 2.5 years, which is always, I think, a good thing. But our top 6 or 7 investors, including Robert Friedland and Rob McEwen and others, they've been investing for the last couple of years. And it's always good when the big shareholders are writing new checks. I feel that's very comforting for me as an investor. I'm sure you'll find it the same way. We'll walk you through some highlights sort of one by one. The biggest one, of course, is the discovery itself, but we'll also walk you through why Quebec's such a great jurisdiction, the fact that we're fully funded, that we've got some amazing investors with us, and we have some world-class scientific talent. And we're moving from 3 rigs to 6 as we speak. So a great time to learn more about it. So let's dive into the details of the deposit. Before we do that, the elephant in the room is what the hell is going to happen with all these tariffs? I don't have the answer to that. If I did, I'd be richer than Midas. But I do want to sort of give you some sort of comments from our perspective. We think the tariff impact on Power Metallic will be minimal to positive. Why do we say that? Well, we don't currently export to the United States, so there's no significant impact on us right now. It doesn't affect our drilling costs in the least. We use all Canadian steel in our drilling just because that's where the pipe comes from, and our obviously Canadian crews, so there's just no cost there. In the next 5 years, which would probably take to get this thing up and running, but a new system established. Whatever it'll be, will be. It'll have stabilized, and we don't see it as having any negative effect. If anything, I was in Washington, D.C. on the weekend. In fact, listened to Secretary Bessent speak in the room on Friday, just after the tariffs, and speaking about the New World Order. And clearly there's going to be a move to sort of a fortress America, I call it, where America will be looking at its supply lines very closely and wanting to have a supply of critical minerals, within the American borders and within its free trade partners, such as Canada. So I expect that's going to be bullish for us in the long run. The other point I would make is that it's, and I can show you a slide about this just next, in fact, we can just take a look at it. This is the commodities time to shine. These are basically the commodity to Dow ratio. And you can see that, there's really been 4 times in history over the last, over 100 years when the commodities have bottomed out to the extent that they have, and they've always ripped up. And if you look in the last couple of, last 40 years, the rip-ups have been significant. So I would say this is the time to be looking at commodity markets. And the reason why that is that basically equities and commodity markets are inversely related. So to the extent our equities are sort of the tech markets being punished, and some of the consumables and the banks, et cetera, and because of this uncertainty, the commodities are probably going to do very well, and so commodity-related companies will tend to do prosper in those times. The final point I'd leave you with is that in difficult times, you focus on margins. Our future mine will be very high margin. Why? Because we have high grades. High grades drive high margins and drive high ROI. So overall, this this new changing world circumstance, I think it's going to be minimal to possibly potentially very positive for us. So I wouldn't want people to be freaked out about it. I mean, obviously in the market, when the fear sets in, people sell and things have happened, and we'll walk you through why. We just raised a boatload of money, $50 million at an average of $2.50 a share, which cost our investors at the time, we'll take you through the math, $1.45. So the new investors really got in at $1.45, even though the company got $2.50 in cash. Today, the stock's around, I don't know, $1.15 or so. So we're sort of down 30 cents off this round, where literally the smartest mining guys in the world gave us this significant amount of money in a very down mining market, where they have a lot of places that could place those bets. So it's like, you guys now have the chance to get in 30% cheaper than anybody else. So good on you. I've been buying. I've publicly said that. I think it's a hell of a time to be looking at Power Metallic. So let's get into the meat of it. The only thing that really makes a great mining story in the long run is a phenomenal deposit. Okay. The rest is all sort of arm waving. At the end of the day, the drill bit will set you free. Okay. So let's talk about that for us. So we had bought this thing maybe 3.5, 4 years ago now. It was a nickel sulfide deposit we had bought. It had 3.1 million tons of 1.5% nickel. Quite a good grade, relatively speaking, nickel EQ. We expanded that. It's up probably around 8.5 right now. The MRE, the mineral resource estimate's around 7.1. But we've done even further beyond that, and so it was trending quite nicely. We thought we could grow to 30 million plus tons just on the nickel sulfide, which would have made it, we believe, a commercial discovery. Along the pathway to doing that, some funny things happened, as happens in mining, and I'll relate a funny story. So what happened is that basically our average depth of mine on the bottom left-hand corner, where the nickel sulfide project is, called Nisk, Maine, was about 400 meters. But sometimes when you run into mineralization, you let the drill bit run. And so at the end of the day, in this particular drill cycle about 2 years ago, we had planned to have X number of holes. And at the end of it, we had, because of running into mineralization, we were down to, instead of having 400 meters left in the drill budget, we only had 200 meters. So my drilling team said to me, Terry, do you want to put some more cash in and do one more hole at Nisk? And the math of exploration in Quebec is that, and at that time, pretty much myself and my friends were financing the company with the help of the federal and Quebec government. So what would happen is I put $500,000 in, my friends and peers who put $500,000 in, and then we get another $1 million from the governments. So we get $2 million to work with. And then we sort of bootstrapped it forward like that. And so if I put 100,000 in to finish this drill, it would just be 100,000. But I'd rather have, like I said, guys, I want to put that in the market so we get 400,000. So no, I don't want to do another hole here. What do we have for 200 meters? So they said, up here in the bottom top right, we've got this great looking target. It looks very similar to Nisk. It's got an airborne anomaly. It looks like there's sulfides underneath here. It's got ultramafic outcrop at the surface. This deposit is associated with ultramafic rocks. So it seemed like a good idea. It was 200 meters. We drilled it. Well, we got amazingly lucky. We didn't find nickel. We found the mother lode of copper. So this is what our top 5 holes look like, just as an example. Over almost 21 meters of almost 8% copper equivalent. I mean, that's world-class stuff. I mean, that this type of discovery hasn't been made in the last 18 years. Sakatti in Finland was the last one, because it's a particular type of ore body called the orthomagmatic. And other ones like it are Voisey's Bay, and of course the Oktyabrsky in the middle there, in the red, that's Norilsk. So Norilsk is literally the world's greatest mine. It's the Russian mine. It's the world's largest nickel mine. It's also the world's largest palladium mine, the 4th largest copper mine, and it's produced over 12 million ounces of gold. So it is truly, the only deposit on Earth that's got $1 trillion worth of materials in the ground or produced. So these orthomagmatic mines are literally the best in the world to have, because they're naturally built-in hedges. They're probably carrying more than $500 per ton in average rock value, which is just phenomenal. And so this is what we've discovered. We've discovered this orthomagmatic discovery. We didn't know it. We sort of got lucky to find it. We did the right thing scientifically, of course, but there you go. And the gods will help you sometimes, and they did for us. It was funny. I was telling this. I was in London just in early January or late January. We're making the rounds, thinking about possibly doing a financing. And I talked to Robert Freeland, and I said, "Hey, Robert, I'm going to be in London. Is there anyone I should see in London that you would think would be somebody we should update?" He said, "Look, if you're in London, why don't you update the Ivanhoe technical team? That'd be good for them to get them up to speed." So I said, "Cool." I went over there and I updated them, and I went through this whole story, and they laughed. They said, "Terry, we'll do you one better. Ivanhoe, which is obviously a mammoth success, their big discovery was in Mongolia called Oyu-Tolgoi, and they were literally firing people in Vancouver, and they hit that on the last hole." So I mean, this is the nature of mining. There's a little bit of romance to it. There's a little bit of luck involved. We did the right things, but we got obviously very lucky. We hit the mother lode. So the interesting thing about this particular slide, this is a creation of our chief geological advisor, Dr. Steve Beresford, and Steve comes to us. He was formerly chief geologist at First Quantum, then at MMG, and then at IGO, where he's chief scientific officer. And those are 3 of the more successful polymetallic discoveries over the last 30 years, several multi-billion-dollar companies. And so Steve, now all he does is he's looking for the next Norilsk, and that's why I contacted him. And so this triangle, which is his perception of these orthomagmatic deposits, he has them in sort of like the nickel, copper, PGE, and the PGE adds gold and silver, and we have significant gold and silver in our deposit as well. So he calls it noble metals. And generally, you sort of fit somewhere in there. And so you can see where Lion is basically just to the right of Oktyabrsky here, and it's even higher grade than Norilsk, if you believe it. The challenge is Norilsk has got its grade over a kilometer of depth, and where ours is maybe like 20 meters, 30 meters. So that's the difference. But we're hoping we're spreading over a bit more of an area than they are. But nonetheless, now what's interesting about this slide is that for every 1 ton of copper sulfide that's found in these orthomagmatic systems, you typically have an average of 5 tons of nickel sulfide. Okay, so the traditional nickel sulfide would be like a percentage copper, a percentage nickel, and a gram of PGEs. So that's likely what's down there as a traditional nickel sulfide. So 5 to 1. Now, right now at Lion, we're probably about 1.2 copper to 1 nickel. Probably soon to go to 2 copper to 1 nickel. So we're finding a boatload more copper. We're likely to find a boatload more nickel. So my point on this slide, one of the takeaways that you should take is the asymmetric upside on us finding a lot more resource is very high. So this is what the line zone looks like at the moment. So it's about 500 meters, 550 meters wide by about 600 meters deep. And it's interesting how we're making the discoveries here, and we're hitting on over 50% of our holes, is that we're using a technique that doesn't work all the time, but when it works like a charm. So it's working for us, and it's called borehole EM or downhole EM. And so what happens when we do a drill, like you can see over here in the bottom left-hand corner of that slide, some images of our core, and you'll see that goldish hue. That's the chalcopyrite. That's when you know you're in money just by looking at it, because I mean that's carrying very high grades. So that's about a 6-inch diameter core. And what happens when you put this downhole EM tool through the core, it turns that 6-inch hole into like a 150-meter hole. And so it gives you basically, connects you to what you'll see on the left-hand side here is that's what looks like to be a sulfide plate. So we're actually drilling that right now. So when we drill these plates, we then intersect them, and they're either commercial or they're not commercial. But so far there hasn't been any false positives. So this is how we've been able to grow. We drill, and as long as we're productive, we always, even if we're unproductive, pull the downhole EM in there, and then we get to see if the sulfide body is still in front of us, and then we keep on going. Now, the interesting thing about where we're at right now on the line zone, our depth is about 600 meters. The width is about 550 at the top. In this particular area, typically, if the width is X, the depth can run to 10 to 20X. So that would take you a very long ways. We just did a ultrasound down there, a magnetic inversion, and it basically showed us that as far as we could see, which is about another 1,500 meters, the ultramafic runs, and this ore body is in contact with the ultramafic. So it's highly likely this is going to run 4 kilometers, and it's super profitable because you're drilling $500 to $1,000 rock all the way down. So it's a pretty staggeringly important discovery. So in addition to the way the scientists have told me to visualize this deposit is think of the palm of your hand, and while it's a nickel sulfide deposit, it has some unique characteristics. It basically at some point in time, some hydrothermal action happened to the ore body and moved the copper sulfides to the surface, and they precipitate in your fingers in these chutes. So the line zone is one chute. We've recently discovered another one we're exploring called the Tiger Zone. It looks like there's another one to the east. And again, in the history of these discoveries, you never find just one chute, you find multiple chutes. And the key to successful polymetallic exploration is finding the chutes and then following the chutes down profitably to ultimately what is probably a massive nickel sulfide underneath. So we've got Nisk main on the sort of bottom left-hand corner, which we've got the 8.5 million tons currently of nickel sulfide, but we think that's just not the core deposit of the nickel. We think that's either on the periphery of it or possibly a separate deposit altogether, and that the actual nickel sulfide that created the line zone we haven't found yet. So that's the exciting part, and we think we're on the track of that. So in addition to sort of growing by finding a lot more copper sulfide rich with PGEs and gold and silver, we think we're vectoring our way down to a massive nickel sulfide. People, ask me a lot, because the stock had gone up, really from 20 cents to $1.90. And obviously we did the financing at $1.45, and now because of the whole Trump, tariff, implications, everything's dropped back. Did we miss it? And my answer when we were at $1.90 was no. And my answer emphatically at $1.15 is absolutely not, because what happens on these world-class deposits is that you're going to get 30, 50, 100 baggers. I mean, they don't come around a whole lot, but when they do, they get big really quick. So it's very early days, and that's one of the great things about our mining market right now. You can look at a lot of great discoveries that have found the resource in the ground, and of course, one of the key things you want to make sure of is they're well funded. So we're well funded. We're not going to be raising capital anytime soon. We've raised $50 million as I said, at 250. Now, I'll walk you through how we did that. The basically what happens in Quebec is they have this program of critical mineral tax credits and tax breaks, and they allow some unique financing. So we were able to basically, for every dollar we raised from the investors, we were able to get $1.95 in flow through from Quebec-based investors. That basically, so what would happen is the Quebec-based investors would put in this case, $2.83, and then Friedland and McEwen and others would buy it back for $1.45. So the company got the 283, the investors get in at $1.45. So it was a win-win for both sides, because the investors got double the money working for them to de-risk their investment, and we got the cash to work with. And of course, the way that the tax system works, the tax investor got to reduce his taxes from 54% to 40%. So it works all the way around. So we just literally finished that funding, and cash is in the bank. So we're thankfully out of the market. So our average is around 250. If we had to do it today, would be around $1.25. So thank God we were able to get this done. When the reason why we were able to get that investment was I was able to make the case that we were very cheap relative to our peers. So this is sort of our valuations, probably a little bit less today, but something in this order of magnitude. And what one could see is that obviously, from a price per unit of metal in the ground, we're very cheap. And if you think about it in terms of like you look at Foran, they're about $1.6 billion, 25.7 million tons, 2.5%. I mean, I think we're almost there now in terms of metal in the ground. So we're trading literally at 20 cents on the dollar. Now, admittedly, they're further ahead in permitting. They've got some great investors. I'm not disparaging Foran. They're a great company and a great deposit. What I'm just saying is that we fully expected after this round that, had in a normal market, we'd probably have been re-rated and gone up a lot, because, relatively, in terms of what we've got on the ground versus our peers, we're very, very cheap. But obviously that re-rating hasn't happened in the current context of the market, but we expect over time that it will happen, and that'll be really good for us. As I said, we're well funded. We financed. The Quebec is a sensational place to do business. Obviously the fiscal terms were one of the reasons, but let's talk about some other pluses. We're literally located off of Route North, so that's a major highway, three roads right beside our front door. We drive right to the rig. Across the street from us is a Hydro-Quebec substation. We have power lines on our property, so obviously getting cheap green electrical power to power this going forward, no problem. We're 8 kilometers outside the town of Nemaska. It's got a regional airport. It's got accommodation and food for our guys. So many of the logistics issues that are such a problem in mining are not a problem for us. So that's an enormous cost saving for us, makes our project much more viable. The other good thing Quebec has done is they've done a great job working with the First Nations. So in any resource exploration environment, you should be concerned with the First Nations wherever you are in the world. What is the relationship with the locals? Do they want to have mining? And if they don't, well, you're in trouble. So we're lucky in that the First Nations here is probably the most well-funded, the most advanced First Nations in the country. James Bay Cree, Hydro-Quebec has done a great job of helping them. They've made a lot of money from Hydro-Quebec. We've also helped them in training and in understanding commercial realities, and they're professionally money managed. They're very good people to work with. They've been work closely with us on a couple of endeavors, and we're working well with them. So I think having good community relations and minimal community risk in terms of mining is fantastic. So they're very pro mining. So mining permits and advancing this thing to production, we're not anticipating any problem. And right now in our current federal election, both leading parties one of them will ultimately win, are calling for streamlined permitting process, 1 year. They're talking about getting rid of the federal review altogether. So all this is going to be super positive for us, and that'll be bullish for us going forward. You know what? In mining, you got to have money, and you got to have talent, and you got to put that money to use very effectively. So for us, Duncan and I are sort of the pitch guys. We're out there telling the world what we've got and why it's important and why they should listen and why it's going to create value for you as shareholders. But when we get the money in, these are the guys that spend it. Okay, we oversee it, but generally these are the scientists that determine our success. And we couldn't have been luckier. Really, we went through Steve's qualifications as sort of being one of the top polymetallic scientists on Earth. And then Joe and Steve actually worked at Western Mining together. Western Mining is one of the iconic mining companies in the world. It was ultimately bought by BHP and became a big part of BHP. But they approach things in a very scientific process. And so Joe and Adam run a company called GeoVector. Even though Joe's our VP of exploration, GeoVector is like the top second or third biggest geological consulting firm in the country. So it gave us enormous bench strength. And the neat part of the Canadian tax laws is by hiring these guys as consultants, I write them off 100%. If they were employees, it'd be 70%. So it's actually paying for us to do it with this. And we got way better talent than we could have otherwise afforded, way more bench strength. So it's really worked out well. One of the obvious concerns investors have with a polymetallic discovery is, what about the metallurgy? Well, this thing, you've got great grades, but will you be able to get it out of the ore body? And we're obviously going to deliver a metallurgical study in H2, so probably second half of the H2, sort of like early Q4, and that will lay this to rest. We're running right now at an 80% recovery rate. We'd expect to do much better than that, but that's what we're using as a number. There has been some challenges on low-grade polymetallics. Chalice, mining in Australia ran to $2 billion in valuations, now around $600 million, because of some struggles they had with their metallurgical recoveries. But that was a low-grade situation relative to ours. Our deposit style is very similar to the Sudbury footwall deposits. Obviously, the origin of the Sudbury deposit is quite different than ours, but the Sudbury footwall deposit style is very similar in terms of being very high in copper and very high in PGEs. And they flushed out very nicely from a metallurgical study. So we're not expecting any bad news on that, but we will be updating that and getting that published to the market in Q2. And one of the questions I get is, what about 43-101s? Will you be doing a 43-101 on the Lion Zone? And the answer is, of course we will, but not soon. We'll probably be doing it in the second half of next year. The reason why is the thing is growing so quick, we don't want it to be pigeonholed. So what we do is we always post our up-to-date drilling collars, azimuths, assays, so that the independent analysts, whether they be an independent geologist is using Leapfrog on the internet or an actual investment bank, they can model it and they can give us our number. So right now, the number that's out there in the analyst community is sort of around 10 million tons of north of 5%. So that's a pretty significant number. We think it's ultimately probably closer to 15 now. We'll see. We've got a few more results that will be coming out over the next few weeks. Our land package we talked about up front, 46 square kilometers. It's very well sort of laid out for us. You can see where Nisk Main is, where Lion is, and the land south of us is owned by Hydro-Quebec, so that nobody's drilling there. So we've got good growth, and we're basically we think these things are connected. So ultimately, we're going to basically work our way between Lion and Nisk. So you can imagine having a several kilometer strike length, and what that would do to your resource. So pretty impressive stuff. We've got a number of assays pending. We expect to get them out. I think next week is sort of what we're expecting at this point in time. So from it's going to be a very newsy story, is I guess the point. We're drilling right now. We've got 3 rigs turning, and that will go to 6 in June, in early June. So we're just finishing up at the end of April, and then we'll have the only time we can't drill at Nisk is basically goose season, moose season, and turkey season. So goose is sort of May. That's when our First Nations generally hunt goose that come up in the region, and it's also quite mushy, and it's a good time to not be there. So we let it dry out a bit, and then we come back in June. We're good. And then moose season is from September 15th to October 15th. Again, we respect that season for them to do their hunting. And then we might be working in the core shacks and doing core stuff, but we would not be in the field. And then at Turkey, we just take about a 3-week break for all of the workers and whatnot, just to so it's about a 40-week drill season, which is adequate to really pepper this with a lot of drilling. So we expect to drill, and we're fully funded to drill over 100,000 meters between now and the end of 2026. So expect news from us, starting next week, every 3 or 4 weeks. So that's going to be, again, this thing at this stage of the game should move with the assays. As we sort of report a growing resource, that means your value in the ground is growing. And at these margins, this is one of the hottest discovery deals on the planet right now. So we're getting lots of eyeballs on us. Other aspects that will create value for us going in the future, we had when we were a nickel sulfide project, we'd been approached by this company, CVMR, and they're the largest private nickel refiner in the world. And basically, they make nickel powders. Nickel powders are used for three things: battery storage, so for EVs and battery storage devices. They're used for 3D printing, and they're used for military, so everything from frigates to missiles to bullets. So three extremely high growth sectors. The sector is growing at this point over 9% a year. And you get right now for LME nickel concentrates about 16,000 a ton. For the nickel powders per ton, it's in the 40 to 60,000 range, and it costs you about 4,000 extra to get there. Now, the nuance is you have to have, there's only like 2 or 3 companies in the world that know how to do this properly. CVMR is one of them. So, Inco or now Vale and Norilsk are the other two that are really good at it. So it's a niche market, and we're looking at potentially doing it. We're doing a feasibility study on building a nickel powder plant with them. Would probably be built. The powder plant would be built in the U.S. The inputs would come from us here at Nisk in Quebec. So we'll have more update on that in probably realistically about 6 months from now, because we're getting more nickely, and we'll have a bunch more resource, and we'll put it out. In terms of the green thing, obviously it'll be interesting to see how the whole environmental movement survives the Trump approach to business. It's interesting. This event I was at on the weekend, the Indo-Pacific region was there, and the Europeans were there, in addition to the Americans, the Canadians, and the Mexicans, and basically it was noticeable the difference. Obviously, the Europeans and the Asians are very committed to the environmental carbonization, movement. So I'd expect it to maintain there. I think America is committed to security, so they want their supply chains sorted out. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to be able to create the world's first carbon neutral polymetallic mine, and it wouldn't cost us more. It'll probably generate actually better economics in the long run. So it's one of those things that it's the happenstance of being in Hydro-Quebec territory. It's literally across the street, so we got cheap green energy to help power the mine. We have an ultramafic deposit that naturally sequesters CO2. The CVMR approach on the nickel side of things is the most environmentally friendly in the world. There's 3 ways to make nickel. You can smelt it, or you can use hydrometallurgy, or you can use chemical metal vapor process, which is what they do. It's a 100-year-old process, but it's just highly, a lot less CO2 issued as a result. So there's a lot of pluses for our approaches in that respect, and we think that'll be ultimately a positive for us. We've used some cutting-edge technology, I guess, this thing called ambient noise. In oil and gas, I know it's an energy business, so I know you've talked about some oil and gas companies. They use people like Schlumberger, and the oil and gas industry has been the pioneer of highly sensitive seismic. Well, mining has always used very, I would call very poorly sensitive seismic, and this ambient noise is sort of a hybrid. So it's not quite Schlumberger, but it's pretty close, and it's a lot cheaper. So what they do is they combine this together with AI, and they bring in all of these geodes that are on the right actually go on the surface. We've done them up in Nisk, and we've gone over the areas. And what happens is it sort of allows us to see our deposit sort of subsurface from a visual perspective. And the more you use it, the more smarter the system gets. So it takes all of our data, whether it be geophysical, magnetic, IP, drilling data, geochemical data, and it models it, and it keeps on iterating. And then what happens is it developed this unique measure called velocity. So as it turns out, I did not know this, but this is how it works. In the earth, everything has a velocity. So all rocks can be measured by speed, meters per second. So what we are able to find out is that for our nickel sulfide deposit, that it's basically between 3,600 and 3,750 from a speed perspective. So it helps us to vector in on areas to sort of explore. So between that and the borehole and EM analysis, it's certainly been helpful and helped us to really ramp up our exploration discovery process. Dan spoke about the spinoff at the start. We actually did complete it, Dan. Finished it February 4th. So we have successfully spun this out. And basically, we've actually used the fleet approach on our Chile projects. And we've identified some pretty smashing new projects to go after there. And we expect to probably take this public in the late fall. And it's a pretty unique set of circumstances for us. So it's owned half by Power Metallic and half by our existing shareholders. So if you were a shareholder as of, I think, February 4th or so, you already received it. And if you're just coming into us now, you're going to get benefit because Power Metallic will own half. And we're pretty bullish on this. So what happens is this project down here is very close to the Candelaria mine. It's a very interesting copper gold target. We had some, the challenge with Chile exploration is the sand is a barrier because the sand has caliche in it, which basically is a mineralized limestone from fossils and stuff. And it basically obstructs IP and gravity, which would be traditionally how geologists would have interpreted rocks underneath the surface. With that not being possible, it's sort of, most deserts have not been fully explored, which is, I think, where the future of exploration will be in mining. But this new approach with the ambient noise doesn't get obstructed by the caliche. So as a result, we're able to get a very good sense of what's there subsurface. So I think that's going to be exciting. And then in BC, this yellow project here is super prospective. This was going to be the flagship until I stumbled across Nisk, and it's very interesting. Scotty Resources is one of the, I think, more interesting junior golds. It's got some great results just north of us, and this is contiguous. Has had several half-ounce gold at surface with big copper intersections. Never been drilled, and so this will be drilled this summer. So it'll be pretty interesting to see. Well, and this will all hopefully come public for us in the fall and benefit all of our shareholders. The team is pretty lean. We've always kept it that way for obvious reasons. But Peter is an experienced corporate lawyer. He's our chairman. Greg is an ex-investment banker, lawyer, and runs a mining company called Silverstorm. Steve, we talked about, Les is a successful businessman, and he owns about 4% of the company, or 3%, I think, at this point. And then we've talked about Duncan and Joe, and obviously Jimena runs our Chile operations. So that's pretty much a wrap. I think we've got a tiger by the tail. It's on sale right now. So God bless you. And it's a great time to be looking at Power Metallic. So happy to answer some questions. I think the audience has got a few, and I'll turn it over to you, Dan, to field those for them.
Okay, Terry, thanks a lot. My take on this, my notes, timing is excellent since the stock is probably grossly oversold at this point, like everything else I'm following seems like. And I think the timing is good because you're going to have some really important news coming out in the next few months for the rest of this year. So anyway, good. I have one question before I get into this stuff. So how does the government funding work? Is the money coming in from the government? Is that a loan or is that just
no? So how it works, like for example, in this round, there are what we call flow-through tax credits and deductions. And so what happens is the Quebec-based investors are aggregated through some Quebec-based funds that do this service for high net worth Quebecers, and they aggregate them as a buyer, and they get the benefit of flow-through tax deductions, various federal tax credits, and various provincial tax credits. And so for them, when they buy for, let's say, the 283, and then they sell to the end use investors the next sort of second for $1.45, that net investment, they actually end up, from a tax perspective, reducing their tax rate from 54% to 40% without any risk. So that's what's in it for them, and that's how it flows through the tax code effectively.
Okay, cool. But it's not money you have to pay back.
No.
Okay.
Nothing we have to pay back.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, so sounds good to me. The world's going to need a heck of a lot more copper. I know that. And
Yes.
I'm not real up on the nickel market, but I know Elon Musk said we need a lot more nickel for EV car batteries.
The nickel market has sort of been, has become a bit of a four-letter word because of the Indonesians sort of swamping the market with supply, and with some breakthroughs that allowed their what we would call class two nickel. There's in nickel, there's class one, which is the higher grade sulfides, and class two, which is your laterites and the lower grade deposits. And for a while, you couldn't do some things with class two nickel, like batteries were not possible for class two nickels. But the Chinese developed an MHP process that allowed that to happen, that sort of freed Indonesian nickel to be used for batteries. And so they sort of swamped that market, and that's what led to the nickel price collapsing. Now, the interesting part is, like, from our perspective, the power nickel lifting cost of nickel is actually cheaper, or will be cheaper, than the Indonesians. So it doesn't really matter if the Indonesians continue to, they're still, producing nickel at a positive ROI for their lifting costs. So that will mean we'll still make lots of money. But the nickel market is over time. It depends on what happens. I mean, I think it's nickel. It's basically, I believe, like you do, Dan, that the forecasts of the world being all EVs was unrealistic to start with. We don't have enough power to make that possible. There's a lot of reasons why that couldn't have happened logistically. But I say to myself, do I see a world where in 5 years there's double the EVs that are on the road? Yeah, I can see that easily. I think that's very likely to happen for a lot of other reasons. So I think there's going to be, definitely a bullish case there for nickel. And then I look at, like, 3D printing and all these other, and unfortunately the missiles defense spending is skyrocketing. All that needs a lot of nickel, so, and then of course the number one driver in nickel is stainless. So stainless steel, which is urbanization. So basically, as people move from agrarian societies and the world gets richer, if Africa gets richer or Asia gets richer, and people start to move from villages into cities and towns, they're buying fridges and stoves, washers and dryers. That all uses stainless. So stainless is considered like basically urbanization. If you believe urbanization is a trend that will continue, nickel will grow.
Yeah. Okay, let me get into some of these that were typed in, and we'll go from there. First, let me get to the one that was just recently typed in. Did I hear right that Steve Bursford owns about 4% of the company?
No, that was Les Mallard.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
he mistyped. Okay. Let's see. What is the criteria for announcing the core analysis? This is the last one a week ago was from late 2024, like over 3 months delay. Is this the type of delay to expect, or is it going to come out faster?
Yeah, would expect it to be out next week, and then there always, when you take it down, there's usually a break, and where you have an extra maybe it goes from 4 weeks to 7 weeks, which is sort of what happened in this circumstance. We actually had sent some core down to South Africa for analysis because we were looking for rhodium. And while we found nothing commercial at the moment, but we expect we will find it here. And so we're sort of on the look for that. But that sort of took an extra month beyond an ordinary, but we figured out another way to do that now. So that won't happen again. So I would say, from a go forward perspective, look for assays sort of every 3 or 4 weeks from us.
Okay. I think this next one you
And
kind of
there's one other aspect too, actually, because one of the guys was commenting on results coming out from 24, and we are actually affected by the Canadian postal strike.
That's true. Yeah.
So, that ended up giving us a several week addition to our turnaround time from the labs. Obviously that's resolved at this point, and I think of recent we're at about 5
And
weeks.
on the postal question, because when our operating team told me this, I'm thinking, surely to hell we're not sending our assays by post. So, and of course we weren't, right? But what happens is, because the Canada Post was down, the couriers were just flat out with everyone, bigger customers. So we couldn't get couriers to come pick up our stuff. Just so people know, because otherwise, when I heard it, I thought that sounds like bullshit to me, but it wasn't.
And it relates to another question that you haven't brought up yet, but was on the list here, and that is we do batch things to be as efficient as we can when we send stuff down to Val-d'Or for analysis. So we're not just doing a hole and shipping it. It's getting put together with a couple others, and we're doing work on those before as well, doing XRF scanning to give us a bit more of an idea outside of just the visuals that we get. And then the guys are doing the borehole or downhole EM subsequently.
Okay. Hey, when are you moving to the 6 rigs?
June, early June. Yeah, we had
Okay.
to scale up our core facilities and cutting and handling. You can imagine you go from 3 rigs to 6. You need just double amount of people, double amount of saws, like more power, bigger facilities, all that stuff. So as much as I'd like to crinkle my nose and make it happen magically, that's not how it works. You actually have to build the stuff.
Well, you have the same problem the oil and gas companies, right? Because you have to wait till the ground dries out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be out there in the mud hauling that stuff around.
No.
There's a question here. It says some ASX, which I think is Australia, correct?
Yep.
Says some Australian companies state exploration targets. Could you maybe state a target for the Lion Zone? He says example like 20 meters at 5% copper, or
I think he's talking at 20 million tons in that question.
Yeah. So it's not typical for Canadian companies to do that. What we've said is that we basically, we're going to be drilling 100,000 meters. That's a target that we'll be held to. Our expectation is we'll be continuing to publish all of our drill colors and assays and results as they come out, so people can model them. And our expectation is when people ask me, I said right now we're probably, the analysts are saying 10 million tons. That was really back in January. I think we're probably closer to 15 now. But the analysts I think will catch up with the newest set of assays. And people say, where do you think you're going to be when you grow up? And Sakatti was, which is another orthomagmatic discovery, was around mid 40 million tons. And Voisey's Bay is 140 million. So I would say, in my mind, I see as being a minimum of Sakatti, and I could see us easily getting to the Voisey's Bay size. So that's obviously monster size. So I mean, that's how big of this could be.
okay. I think you answered this for us. So with the recent drop in share price, will you be buying shares in the open market? And I'll add to that, will the major shareholders be buying shares?
I expect they're doing it. I mean, I publicly announced on I think Monday that I was going to buy over the next 10 days, and I have been buying. So I think it's a great buy right now.
Yeah, but because these are long-term,
projects. I mean, look, listen, when we got that money in at $1.45, I was actually, I got criticized a bit internally for taking it for too cheap relative to what we know we got in our own mind. But I sort of was of the view that, look, I just wanted to get the cash in to have security so that we could just, execute. Because I thought, well, if we leave maybe 30 cents on the table, whatever, it's like we're going to pick it up on the back end because we're going to get multiple dollars here. So, and I think that's proven to be, obviously, a good call. But I mean, at the time when we did that, the mining market was tough, and it's even tougher today. But there is a lot of places people could have chosen to put that money. They chose to invest it with us, and this is like these were the cream of individual mining investors like Robert Friedland, Rob McEwen, and others, and then obviously these mining funds, and every mining guy on the planet goes to the same group of people to get capital, and we got filled, and we were oversubscribed, so I think. That when they look at it, because they obviously know that there's ups and downs in markets, but they look at it and say, hey, what's going to happen? What's the end game for this? So within 2 years, most likely, there's going to be some mammoth takeout here, okay? Or this becomes so good that we end up JVing it where we'll never build it because we don't have the talent, but we might stay in as a half owner if somebody else builds it and gives us cash. That's another possibility, but that's going to be hugely up from here. So that's really what they're betting on. That these guys aren't betting on a trade. They didn't buy it to sort of at $1.45 to get off at a 225. They bought this at $1.45, thinking this is going to be double digits and it might take a couple of years. And that's what we believe.
Yeah. Let's see. I think a couple of these we already answered about getting sequencing and periodicity of lab results of cores. We saw, okay, can we speed up the analysis with 6 rigs running? I guess the answer for that is yes. And if the
I
post,
mean, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like I said, I think we feel pretty good that the results should come every, 3 or 4 weeks from this point going forward. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I think that answers Bruce's other one. Will there be enough lab turnaround capacity for timely essays? And I guess that answer is correct. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. John asked, what is the time frame for commercial production? Let's say somebody with, major money, BHP or somebody comes in and says, hey, we want to make a deal and
Yeah,
start
so
this month.
I would basically think 5 years is very doable. You might be able to do it in 4, but certainly 5 is very doable.
Okay. That's the thing with a lot of our members are primarily oil and gas people, and
I know.
it comes much faster.
Yeah, it is mind blowing when you think of it. I will say the high grade polymetallics get developed much quicker than a porphyry or something like this. And the reason why is the ROI is so staggering. Like this thing will pay out in a year probably. So it's like so you got high value economics. So you're not worried about the payback period. Paybacks, it's more permitting and construction. So permitting, now right now in Canada, permitting is 2 years likely. And it has taken as long as 3 in some cases, and I guess in some cases it's just seems to never come. But in our area, probably 2 to 3 would have been the expectation. Both federal parties that are likely to win, one of them is likely to win, are advocating for like a 1 year or in the case of the Liberals, the removal of the federal review, which probably would reduce it to about the same. So they're advocating for quicker permitting approvals. So that would speed up the process. It's about a 2-year construction process. So nothing can change that really. So you're at 2 years construction and then it's the permitting. So permitting is likely to be enhanced because of the economic cycle we're in and the political winds are behind that. So that will be a very big plus for us.
And these are going to be open pit mines, right?
So this will be a small open pit at the top and then a decline. So these are 20-meter widths and stuff. Expand, they're going to go sort of 10 to 30. So they're all very mineable, and so you'd have a small open pit at the top and then decline. But again, this is
it goes a ramp like a tunnel,
like a ramp down,
into the
and the thing is, this is like think of it as like a river of material. This is what literally it is, and the river sometimes pinches and it swells, and then sort of. On the small side, it can be 5 meters, and on the big side, it's 42 or something like that. So these are all very mineable, and you just mine them out normal, sort of ramp down, stope mining, and fairly conventional, nothing exotic.
But that technology you were talking about, that really helps you get a better idea of the subsurface.
Yeah,
so you know where to put the tunnels and where to go to.
Yeah. The ANT is used more for, I would say, exploration. I'm sure it could be helpful in development too. But you basically what happens on these things is, at this stage, we're trying to get a grip around how big is this thing, okay? Because we haven't even found the edges of the system yet. So we need to find the edges of the system, and then once we find the edges, then that's when okay, it's 40 million tons, it's 140 million tons, it's 500, whatever the number is, we find it, and then it's like, okay, now let's approach it as a miner. What are we going to do? Well, let's block out the first 10 years supply, and then you got to drill density those things, so you take away all the risk of the deposit risk in terms of just drilling density, etc. And you do that, and that's when you throw 10 rigs at it, punching holes every 25 meters or whatever it needs to be for continuity. So that's how it goes in the development process.
What would you see somebody coming in here and taking the whole thing, or can you sell it in pieces, like just sell the lion part?
Yeah. So I mean, I think what what we want to do with this money is see how big this is,
Right.
and then you know, we'll see how what's the best way to monetize it. You know, for sure, you know, the big guys will want the whole thing, but this thing is going to be so rich that we
Mhm.
can sort of determine our own fate. You know, because remember, you know, it's an important point we haven't addressed yet. In addition to the Quebec and federal government's giving you 50% on the exploration dollar, we actually get 50 cents on the development dollar too. So if the first phase of development costs 400 million, which is probably a reasonable number, 200 million of that's going to come from the feds and the province. So now we got another 200 million that used to be typically bank financed. So it's almost like you can finance out of this now with the current, you know, cycle of
Mhm.
grants and credits. And you know, now we're not an experienced mine builder, so we could never be the builder. But could we go to any number of parties, whether it be private equity miners, you know, or people like, you know, Agnico or Tech or whatever, in addition to all the giants, BHP, you know, Vale, Rio
Mhm.
Tinto, uh, you know, they're all going to want in on this one because it's going to be so lucrative.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is, you know, everybody's projections are the demand for copper is going to just be taking off, and they're running out of supply, quality supply. So this sounds like would be a hell of a target for them. Anyway.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And of course, everyone wants to get into projects that got a lot of legs, and like these projects here, historically, the ones that have been found in the history of the world are always giants or super giants. So they have like 1 million tons or north of 10 million tons of metal. So
Yeah.
that means multiple mines, multiple years of mine life,
Oh yeah,
and that's what big
decade.
guys like because they've got big resources to deploy, and they're looking for ROIs in that. So this will be one of those few projects that sort of fit a lot of their criteria.
Yeah. Uh, okay. Oh, it just on the things that you spun out there. So when that goes public, you're going to hang on to your 50% of it. And so that
Yeah, we intend to. Yeah, you know, so
so
you
it'll
know,
be real able to say, okay, what's the market value of that? It'll be should be based on the share price.
yeah. So we did evaluation before the spin out, and we did it at basically it was I think roughly around 20 million shares out, and we think we did it at 33 cents. It might have been
Uh,
21. It was around 7 million valuation, I think, and which was super cheap at the time. That deposit that area used to trade for 25, 30, but in this like ridiculously valued, you know, exploration market, that's probably the fair price.
yeah.
But we subsequently we've done this, you know, work with fleet and work things up. So I think there's going to be a really nice exploration story to tell there. And you know, but probably fall time would be the right time. Right now would not be a good time to be rolling that out.
Yeah, well, that's one of the questions. Why not spin out the remainder of the other prospects so you just concentrate on this? But you know, like you said, I don't wouldn't want it's like I wouldn't want to be taking an oil and gas deal public right now. You would
No.
you'd be getting 10 cents on a tower or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, I guess we can leave it at that. And Terry, I was very impressed. I'm very impressed by the project. Probably put some money in this myself. Uh, anyway, it's a good presentation, and you definitely got some quality stuff going there. And as we discussed before, prior to getting going on this thing, the tariff wars are going to end, people. This is not like the COVID-19
Yeah.
pandemic that was a real, you know, a real deal, a real problem for the world for years. I think the countries are going to negotiate some kind of deal. They know they have to. There's a lot of pressure on all these companies' leaders to get something done, and especially on Trump. So anyway, any more comments, Terry?
No, I think that listen, I appreciate there's a lot of good questions there. I think there's a lot of good information there. So it's a great time. Honestly, you know, if you've got some capital to deploy, it's bargain hunting time. You remember the first wave of COVID, all the bloodshed, and then the money that bought made so much money. You know,
Oh
so
yeah,
I think that's the, you know, find the right companies that are well funded, that have real stories. You don't want to be playing in the margins now. You want the stuff that's looking like an all-star, and find those and bet heavily.
yeah, and you know, everybody, this world's going to keep growing. You know, more people, more demand for energy, and more demand for materials. That's the
Yes.
thing. You
Yeah.
can't grow your economy without energy and materials, and that's why this company looks very interesting to me. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We did record this. We will be sending out the recording to all of our members worldwide this afternoon, and you'll have a link that you can send to your contacts too.
Thanks so much, guys. Cheers, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.